7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Good evening and welcome. You're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Darkness Radio presents Holzer's Ghosts. And tonight we are talking about the most recent episode of the program, Don't Send Them to Heaven. It was season 2, episode 11. That's right, folks. After tonight, only 2 episodes remain, including our excellent episode next week, or this coming Saturday, rather, which I'm very excited about. It is our triumphant return to the Queen Mary. Queen Mary has been something that is very near and dear to my heart. I've been aboard the ship 15 to 20 times, 15 of them, I think, just leading my events and visiting. So it's exciting to get a chance to go on. And that episode stands out to me because, again, it's the first time in history that a paranormal team was allowed to go in and investigate the entire ship with no visitors and no employees aboard. It was completely devoid of life. And having been there so many times, it is very unusual to be back aboard this ship that I love so much, that has had so many strange and historic haunting encounters, and there was nobody there. And the action and activity that we witnessed and the stories that the employees had to share with us, both current employees and past employees, it was astounding. It's one of my favorite episodes this season, but we are coming into the end. Just 2 episodes left. Next week on Holzer's Ghosts, Cindy Keza, Shane Pittman will be joining me here, and we will discuss that story and take it a little bit deeper. Then our season finale comes in 2 weeks, and I'll be having some of the behind-the-scenes people joining us here on Holzer's Ghosts. Some of the cameramen, possibly sound. One of our directors I'm working on trying to have him join so we can get some background information. Many of you have questions of what's it like and how do they respond. So we'll talk about that and dig a little deep into the season finale. I know only 2 more episodes left from this season and Holzer's Ghost goes away. Or does it? No, we're going to go back and continue revisiting season 1. I know during the break, when we had our mid-season hiatus, I started doing season 1, and I think I did 4 episodes of the 10. So we'll pick up again and continue so that you get insights on all 23 episodes of the Holzer Files. So we'll complete season 2. We'll do that. And then after that, I've got some other great specials. So we're going to continue having specials here from Darkness Radio on Thursday nights. We're going to take a deep dive into Amityville. That's right. And I've got some special guests from the Amityville documentary Shock Doc on Discovery Plus that'll be joining us with, we're going to go over the case detailed, and we're going to talk to somebody who has had a chance to investigate Amityville just in the last few years. So you're going to want to make sure that you tune in for a Holzer's Ghost episode as we take a look into Amityville. I've also got some other cool episodes I'm going to be talking. I've got a cool little round table of paranormal pals that are going to come together. We're going to talk about everything and anything paranormal. So I hope that you'll join in for that as well. Tonight, let's get started. As I said, Darkness Radio presents Holzer's Ghosts. Don't Send Them to Heaven. I'm very proud of this because the episode's named after the EVP that I captured on this program. But joining me tonight, a good friend of mine has been for a long time, paranormal pop culture journalist extraordinaire. He's a host of his own podcast. We'll have him introduce all that as well. Ladies.
Hi, Dave. I can't actually hear you right now. You went silent on me.
Try that. How's that? Is that working?
That was great. Okay, I can hear you now. I blame the ghost.
Don't know what's happening. I'm not hearing anything from you, buddy.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? I can't hear
I
you. This is so bizarre. We were
okay.
playing with it,
Well,
trying to get things going. Let me see. Amityville, awesome. So the audience, can you still hear me? Shoot me some notes on the side. Let me know because I'm here.
and
I
I
can't
can
hear
hear
you.
you, Dave.
Yeah, let me try this, Aaron. I'm going to try muting you and unmuting. Say
How's
hi to me,
this?
Aaron.
Can you hear me
Nothing.
now?
That is so weird. Why don't you pull out, come back in, and we'll see if that reboot will help get you back on the air with us.
All right.
Yes, okay, everybody can still hear me. That's fantastic. Thank you. I'm glad that that's continuing on. I don't know. We've had some strange things happen during Holzer's Ghosts with some of the technology. We were talking for about 12, 15 minutes before the show began. So I'm not quite sure why Aaron's audio isn't working. Are you with me now, Aaron?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you perfectly. Thank
Okay.
you
Well, this
very
is. I
much.
don't know what was happening. That's very weird.
Could you still hear me?
Yeah, I could. We were just chatting before backstage.
Right.
I heard your whole intro. I don't know. Maybe the ghosts just don't want me as a guest tonight. I don't know. It's
No.
possible.
Well, I do. And this is my show, so we're going to keep you in. Aaron, thank you so much. Buddy, I got to talk about this because it's exciting. You and I have both had a chance to go to the Queen Mary. We've been on board together. We've worked. We're going to be back out there. I got to ask you, what's one of your fondest memories from the Queen Mary?
Well, it's funny because I love this ship and I'm really happy that you filmed there because I do think that this helps with the preservation of this ship. But one of my fondest memories is one of those weird throwaway moments where I was traveling out there for an event and I was coming from the East Coast. It was late at night because my flight was delayed coming from New York. I got into town and got into the Queen Mary at approximately like 3 a.m., which was something like 5 or 6 a.m. New York time. Just want to go to bed, just exhausted, knew that I had a whole day of talking and everything the next day. I lay down, I crawl into bed, and as I'm drifting off to sleep, I feel the sheet next to me lift, and I feel a weight slide into the space next to me. And that alone is unusual because I sleep alone. But I felt this weight next to me, and I was so exhausted that I was just like, I just can't right now. I like, please not right now. I need to go to sleep. Leave me alone. And then there was a beat. And then that weight kind of dissipated, and then the sheet settled right next to me. And it was one of those just like amusing, quirky little moments where you're just like, this is my job. And also, this is weird. And also, something is listening to you.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Right.
so wild, and I loved it.
And you know what I love about those stories? You know, when I was on the Queen Mary hosting one of our first events, I remember as I'm strolling down the hall, you know, I usually stay up late, make sure everybody's broken down from the parties, everybody's on their way home and into their rooms. And I go down the hall and there's this girl outside, she's very upset. What's wrong? She goes, the water keeps turning on in my bedroom. And I'm like, well, that's cool. And she goes, no, it's not. And I go, but aren't you here for the paranormal conference? She goes, yeah. And I go, but you're having activity. She goes, yeah, but I don't want it in my room. I want it out here. I don't want it in there. And I was like, well, you can't, let's go in and check. So being the gentleman I am, I decided to escort this beautiful young lady alone into her room, Aaron, because I'm a giver, you know.
You are.
Yeah. So we went in and we sat there and nothing happened. And I said, all right, listen, I'm in this room like 4 doors down. If you really get freaked out, come knock on the door and we'll see what we can do. I think I got in bed about an hour later. I'm hearing. So I go and open the door and she's like, I'm not sleeping in there. I'm not sleeping in there. And I go, okay, do you want me to see if we can go switch you to another room? She's like, yeah, please. So we had to actually go down to the front counter and they had to get her switched into another room in the middle of the like 4 o'clock in the morning because she couldn't take the presence and the fact that they kept turning the water on. And I'll tell you this, being back aboard the ship with nobody there, the spirits were making sure that we knew they were there. It's a crazy, crazy existence. And since we're talking about bedroom encounters, before we launch into today's episode, let's take a quick peek at a scene from next week, Dead Calm, The Haunting of the Queen Mary. There's something out there. I am definitely hearing something. It is so dark.
I hear you moving around up there.
Are you on the stairs? We are not alone on this ship. Yeah, we were not alone. And if you were eagle-eyed watching that piece of video, you might have noticed something a little hinky. That's all I'm going to say. So next week, it is that episode, Dead Calm. We'll show another clip in a bit from that episode as well. But let's talk about tonight's episode. Going back to this past Saturday, the episode, this was exciting for me. And I got to be honest with you, Aaron, I love history. And the fact that we were able to go to a location that had ties or possible ties to the Underground Railroad was really unbelievable for me.
Well, it's such a significant part of not only American history, but really, when you consider it, it is recent American history. I mean, we're talking about 100 years, 140 years ago. That's not that long ago. So this is very relevant and fresh for us.
I know my dad brings up points. He's like, you realize my parents, so my dad's grandparents grew up in that era, right? And you're like, wait, what? So they grew up in those time frames. So it's kind of weird to realize you're not that far removed. It's like 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? You're not that far removed from history where the world was a shockingly different place.
Yeah, most certainly. Because I mean, I was raised in Florida, and my father is from Florida, and his father is from Florida, and then Alabama. We're already talking about 100 years ago, not that much further back. We're right in this time frame. And I mean, I think it's actually a really good thing, because it is a reminder of like how fresh our wounds are as a nation. And it's important to remember how fresh those wounds are. You know, they're not several hundred years ago. They're not like when we travel to Romania or even Ireland or wherever. Those are like thousands of years back. This is less than 200 years ago.
Right. And to be there in this house and know that in 1967, the year I was born, Hans Holzer was there investigating. And this story was kind of unique to me because, again, Hans was not one that was easily rattled. He'll tell you, and he's said in interviews, he was never afraid, but he would definitely get unnerved. And especially if he felt like something might go out of his control. And having one of his mediums starting to become affected really bothered him. The USS Constellation from season 1, the medium, I think it was Sybil Leek that they went on with. Sybil basically got chased off that ship. In this case, Hans was so worried for Ethel Myers that he ended it early. And it was crazy to me that Cindy's picking up on that. That imprint is still there of Hans Holzer's anxiety and concern for his medium.
No, but do you think that because, I mean, this was happening originally in the year that you were born, when you arrive on a location, you're bringing your personal history with you. It's sort of, I mean, we're both nerds. It's like The Empire Strikes Back Force Cave, the Dark Side Cave on Dagobah. What you bring with you into an investigation impacts what you what you find. Do you
Right.
think that your own personal connection, your own date of birth, perhaps kind of laid the groundwork for the kind of contact, the kind of phenomena that you were experiencing?
That's a great question. I'd never really pondered that. I know a lot of what happens is because of the intent we set going into these locations.
Mhm.
Intention is very important for all of our team, from Alex to Gabe to Cindy, Shane, and myself. We go in with these intentions to have an experience, to kind of protect ourselves from dark, malevolent forces, but allow us to witness these things without being affected or influenced. But Cindy is very strict. She does not want to know anything about these cases. And I kind of had to back and forth with the directors. I'm like, really, guys, everything I'm hearing and reading through these notes, these copious notes that Hans Holzer's taken, he was really concerned for his medium. I think we need to give her some kind of heads up, because I don't have to tell her what happened, but I think she should be aware to be a little bit more cautious. And they're like, Dave, she does not want to know. And I'm like, well, I'm the team leader. I'm going to tell her something because I feel uncomfortable. And I feel, Hans pulled out his medium because he was that worried. I'm going to stand by that same right. We're walking in the footfalls of a legend. And I feel like he would do the same thing without giving information away. So you see that moment of confrontation. But what was great is I just start to warn her. She's like, yeah, I'm feeling there's people that have been oppressed here. There is definitely a connection, and it's very strong and powerful. I'll be very careful. So that made me feel better. She was already aware of it before I even needed to mention anything about it. But I get concerned for her. I know she's been doing this her whole life, and she is so diligent at her training and working and what she eats and sleeps and yoga to really kind of prepare herself physically, mentally, and spiritually for these encounters. But I still have that dad feeling of, I'm really worried, this is something out of our control.
But you're approaching it from, and I appreciate this, by the way, but you're approaching it very much from a 21st century perspective. What I find fascinating about the world in which Hans operated, I do think that it was a little bit, when people watch TV shows now, their accusation is, well, he was leading the witness. He was kind of prepping her for that moment. And I understand that kind of concern. And that's something that I've thought myself when I watched some of the shows that we've worked on. But when you look back at the world that Hans lived in, that was less of a concern because it was so new that he could pull that medium out of that situation and it was all good. I mean, you have to operate within a separate set of rules. And Cindy also, she's savvy. She knows that she's also operating within that separate scenario, that new 21st century scenario. Does that make sense?
No, you're right. And we have the gift of insight because, as you said, when Hans went there, he had no concept of what was going on. He laid the groundwork. So if I went in and didn't alert the medium to be a little bit more cautious than normal, I think I would be doing Hans Holzer and the work that he's done a disservice. So that's why, a lot of people are like, why did you tell her? Why did you let that part out? And I said, well, I think it's important because, again, I've got, as kind of the lead investigator, I have to protect my team.
Well, you're
Dave,
also just like this is not just a team that you are creating and producing for TV. These are also friends. These are also colleagues. These are people that you trust and you care about. And if you just send someone into the dark without any heads up, when you feel like they might be vulnerable, then you're just callous. And
hey now, everybody's going, see, Dave, what you do to Shane week in and week out is callous.
Well, I mean, Shane probably deserves it, but Cindy, no, but I mean, like, you're looking after your people. And if you didn't, then, I mean, maybe it would make for better TV if you just sent them out there without warning them. But then you would be sacrificing a bit of that humanity. And I don't think it's worth it.
Well, and people, talking about today's episode, we go to this house, 1967, Hans and Ethel Myers go there. They have a very solid connection, and he tries to help a spirit of a soldier move on. It goes on. We get the chance to go in there and then find out from, the Historical Society, just so you're aware, some of these houses along this pathway were part of the Underground Railroad.
Mhm.
And I was excited by that. And, I said, well, how do I know? What do I look for? She goes, it's impossible to say. It's Scooby-Doo. I could go turn a candlestick and a door could open up. I'm like, really? And she goes, well, probably not that elaborate, but look for things in rooms, especially in the older parts of the house, that would seem very Scooby-Doo. And I'm like, okay. And that leads us. Now, I'm, of course, talking about the space that we found. And
Mhm.
I know people are like, oh, Schrader, take one for the team. Shane takes one for the team every week. You guys saw that door was like this big. And this, I'm 6'1", nearly 3 bills. I would have gotten down on my knees and collapsed. I couldn't get in into that little space. So Shane legitimately had to be the one. And Cindy was not going to be the one to get in there. I think she had a skirt on and tights. She wasn't going to crawl in on this deal. But I thought it was interesting that she heard a voice. We called into that room.
Mhm.
She hears a voice by her. First, I'm kind of flushing around on the floor. And this is a point I want to talk about, and I'm going to play a piece of audio. Not everything makes the episodes, but I had my recorder going. And when I was down on the floor, I was feeling around for a while, and I found something. And I was so excited when I found it. And so if you remember, when you're looking in that room on TV, off to the left is that bookshelf, right?
Right.
And then it's just a big room. Well, off in the right corner of the room was a panel, and you could barely tell it. But as I was pushing around on the floor, it shifted. So I have some audio, and this is the best I can do on this one. I've got some audio, so I'm going to play it and see if you guys can hear this. But this was a just a funny moment that didn't get shown.
That's really bad. Absolute shit. I think there's like there's something rotting down there. Oh my gosh. That's really bad. Absolute shit.
So the floorboard gets lifted up. I find it. I'm very excited. As I go to stand up, I may or may have not farted. I can't be certain, but I didn't tell anybody. So I'm like, oh my God. So Cindy and Shane come running over to look at the hole. And when Cindy goes, we got to, whoa, God, shit. And Shane's like, I think something died down there. And I come over and I'm looking down there. I'm like, huh, I wonder. That's really weird. The reason it didn't make the episode, obviously, it was actually a crawl space where you could go down and service the pipes for the house. It had nothing to do with the Underground Railroad. But I just thought it was hysterical that you hear Cindy and Shane's we carried on. They carried on for quite a while, and the camera guys are laughing hysterically because they're both like, oh, and we actually sent Shane down for a few seconds into that area. Of course we did. And he comes up and he's like, I can taste it. Oh, it's horrible. It's just hanging in the air. And I'm like the only one not laughing in the whole crew. We have our camera guys and our sound guy, Cindy, myself, and Shane. And we're just like, I'm very calm about it because I know what it is. I felt so bad, but it was such a funny moment, and I still haven't told them.
So, a couple things. First off, he who denies it supplies it, according to classic fart rules. But also, I feel so unprofessional because I have, I think, a good poker face. I can maintain my composition. And yet, when I hear about you letting one rip and then just like letting it go and letting poor Shane slip into that tunnel to be entirely exposed to the horrors, to the vile stench. I just cannot contain this kind of moment. if anyone If anyone is just like listening to this as an audio format,
Yes.
and you don't see me, my face is beet red by trying to contain the laughter.
But you've got that pain to look like you can almost psychically smell what I was.
I mean, I
felt so bad, but it was like one of those little. That's all. And
well, those are the worst kind.
Oh yeah,
like just that. Like I'm gonna just sneak out a little bubble, just a little boop, and then you're like, oh god, like that really just filled that tunnel that poor Shane has to now climb in. Oh
yeah.
dear.
No, it was just in that room, but it was Cindy's. Something's dead. Oh, it smells like shit. It was just so funny, and so that moment. Thankfully, it wasn't really, because that would have ruined the entire thing. But it wasn't the Underground Railroad there. Thankfully,
it reminds me of an SNL sketch from a couple years ago, and I'm sure you saw it. Like I would actually show this at some of the events that I did with you, where it was Hugh Laurie from House presenting himself as a British investigator. And he lets one rip, and the other British investigators enter the room. They're like, oh my God, it smells like brimstone, a horrible demonic stench. What's that from? He's like, maybe we should just move it along. Just ignore this one.
Like the one guy's like, I think it said Roger.
Roger.
Yes. So I had my Roger moment on this episode, and it was funny. I ended up telling the director later. I'm like, hey, that was my bad.
Maybe we could just cut that bit.
And he said, well, he goes, thankfully that wasn't what we were looking for anyway. So we get Cindy's, we kind of clear up, everybody gets refreshed, and we go over there, and Cindy's like, oh, and she hears a voice, and she starts feeling the panel. But when you're thinking magic door, you're thinking like Scooby-Doo, you open it up and the whole panel moves. Nothing there. And I couldn't believe it when I hit that wall and it swings open. I was like, are you kidding me right now? That's what my kids were watching it with me tonight, and they were laughing because of the glee you can hear in my voice. And I'm like, it's part of the Underground Railroad. I was just so blown away that we had that moment, and an important piece of history was there. And I tell you, I hate the fact that I couldn't get in there. I know it sounds morbid, but I wanted to put myself in that moment in history as well. If I could have gotten into that thing and gotten out in one piece, I would have loved to have gone in that room. And I really kicked myself for not having tried either the next day or whatever, just to be in that space.
But the moment alone really illuminates, I think both of us being so steeped in pop culture, the idea of sort of the James Bond level villain's lair, Scooby-Doo level bad guy lair, comic books. It's cool, but there's also like an amusement factor to it. I mean, heck, if I could just build my own mansion, I would have a hidden pathway. But then when you consider the actual historic significance of something like this, something that is literally connected to saving people's lives, that brings it home in a whole new way, in a very legitimate, significant way. And it's kind of sobering. I mean, it's gleeful, but it's also very sobering that, look, this wasn't just a gag. This wasn't just like pop culture. This really was a border between someone's life or death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not even that's not exaggerating the situation.
Well, and I think that's why when Shane went in there, he was so deeply impacted by that moment and the sensation and the fear of not knowing, are you about to be caught? Now, here's the funny thing about this episode. I've gotten mail from people and some public admonishments saying, how dare you say it was a slave and one of their children? And, you have no idea if that was truly a stop on the Underground Railroad. Well, listen, we fit the criteria. It's in the oldest part of the house. it's hidden behind a panel. And it wasn't hidden behind a panel where you can get to an electrical box or something that needed to be there. And why would you hide it behind a book panel and only the bottom part of the book panel? So to me, it was very strange. Plus, everybody's like, nobody ever said that it was an African American or a slave woman standing in that window. And I said, no, but Cindy was picking up on that it was an enslaved woman. Shane didn't say it was an African American kid, not out loud to you guys. But again, in those moments, because we're TV, you've got to be extremely politically correct. And he just mentioned that he saw the boy, and not, when you're freaked out, not that he would have said anything derogatory or hateful, but is it a slave child, enslaved child, African American child, a black child? So it was better for him just to say he saw the boy. That way there was no issue. But he did, in fact, see what he believed was an enslaved African American boy. Now, what's weird is that 53 years prior, when Ethel was there with Hans, she's picking up on this mother trying to find her son, Will. And for him to be in that space, and Will comes out, and then boy, and sold. So yes, this was a stop. And by stop, sometimes it was for a few hours until somebody else could, squire them away. But this mom might have been separated from her children. We have to go on what Cindy's picking up on and tying it to the history we know. So when she's hitting on everything else so detailed and correct, and we're able to corroborate that, it's not an exact or perfect science, but being a paranormal show, we go and trust our medium like Hans Holzer did. And this is what she picked up on, and it connected with the history that we were able to find and uncover about the house. So I wanted to address it because I thought that was of all the things that have been on the show, that was a weird element to me, that people were challenging me that you don't know that was part of the Underground Railroad. You don't know this, you don't know that. And, but what we can go on is what we're experiencing. So with that said, there was an interesting moment when Shane was in there. And he said he could hear footsteps. And then they cut to Cindy. Cindy's upstairs writing, automatic writing. And then they cut to the outside of the hidden room. I have a piece of video that many of the listeners have sent to me. And I'm going to play this a few times to discuss this. So when it cuts, you're going to see the door, the panel, and you're going to see an orb move from the door away. This is timed at the exact same point that he's hearing footsteps. We don't talk about orbs on the show, like I said, unless there's corroborating evidence. I did not notice that piece. I didn't. And why? Because it was on one of our static cameras. And although we'll power through, sometimes we're zipping through watching that footage. I mean, we have hours upon hours of footage. You're waiting for something big to happen, like a shelf to tip or a door to open or a full vision to come across. So you don't notice the little zipping lights. I can't say this is a ghost, but it sure is small. And I don't even know that this really is an orb so much as it looks like you're looking from that camera at the top of a kid's head as it moves across. So I'm going to play that video here if I can figure this nonsense out. And let me see if I can share the screen and do this. So bear with me. And I'll make sure I can turn on the audio on this one as well. Here we go. One more time. So there is definitely something there. Something moves from that door frame. I can't say it's a ghost, but it is intriguing. And great job to all of the Eagle Eyes Holzer File fans out there that saw that, slowed it down and shot it, because I didn't notice it. Shane didn't notice it in the initial deal. Now there are orbs, and we're in a dusty old house. It is what it is. This is a 200-year-old house, and seams are not perfect. Windows are not perfect. You do get a breeze through there. So it's hard to say it wasn't dust or something more natural.
I mean, I guess my thought on it is, I mean, look, it's the great orb debate, right? Is it a dust particle? Is it moisture? Is it an insect? Or is it something else? Now, while I think a lot of these so-called orbs can be dismissed, when it aligns with other things happening, that's when it makes me intrigued. That's when it sort of lines up, and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe there's my spidey senses are tingling. I think maybe there's something more to it.
So I will say that is intriguing, especially because inside the cabinet at that time, Shane's hearing footsteps. Cindy's picking up on something, and then we capture that movement like it's leaving the door. So good eye, everybody.
Yeah, so you're talking about levels of activity, layers,
Right.
And that's interesting to me.
Now, another scene that they didn't show, of course, it didn't show anything, but showing you just how careful we have to be. I was stationed outside doing the baseline, all right, listening in and following along and looking at the notes. And as I'm doing that, all of a sudden I heard boom, boom, boom. Now I know what part of the house they're in because I'm watching it, but it's coming from behind me and off to the side. And I'm like, what the hell is that? There was something thundering, boom, boom, boom. And I'm like, what is, and I finally got up and like the camera guys and sound guy are looking at me and they're like, where is that coming from? I walk around, they had a horse in the stable and it was thumping at the ground because it was mad that, it was closed off and couldn't get out to the trough at that time. So it was letting us know. So they took care of that. But yeah, I mean, that was a moment of sheer panic, but I'm so proud of the production company because that could have been one of those black cat jump scare moments where I go, what's that? And then we come back to find out it's the horse stomping the ground, but they don't want to do that. Why waste one moment of the TV show with a red herring and giving you misdirection when what we've got is so cool and happening right now?
I most certainly agree. I think that that's when you also that you're working with a good production company or working with a good show, that they're not trying to force the activity. They trust that the activity is going to come. There's going to be a good show at the end of this. We don't need to push the horse thumping in your reaction and presenting it as something paranormal.
Agreed. And I'm glad that they're able to do that. We do need to take a quick break. Before we do that, folks, I've got a cool deal going. Here's my book, The Other Side, A Guide to Ghost Hunting and the Paranormal. I've got a copy of this book. We'll actually autograph it for you so that you can have an autographed copy of the book. It also comes with one of our Darkness Radio card decals. And because I love you people, I have an autographed Holzer Files card, the entire set, all three items, $20. Plus, I think $4 shipping and handling. So it's $20 plus $4 shipping and handling. If you are interested, I'll leave this up on the screen. Just email me, dave@darknessradio.com. That's dave@darknessradio.com. And I will send you a link. My wife, who runs that part of the deal for me, will send you a link. And you can order the book and get the autographed book, get the autographed Holzer Files card, and get the free Darkness Radio I can't say free, you're paying $24 for everything, but I'm throwing that in so that you get all of those pieces in one collection. So if you're interested in it, just email me, dave@darknessradio.com. Stay tuned, we'll be back. We've got more Holzer's Ghosts Presents Don't Send Them to Heaven, and we'll play that EVP and something cool, an addendum to that EVP, when we return right here on Darkness Radio. We're back. This is Darkness Radio, your home for the best in paranormal talk radio. You can hear us 5 nights a week. Monday. Well, no, I guess I'm lying. Boy, I just recoiled to like 4 years ago. I'm not on 5 nights a week anymore. I'm on, you can hear us 3 days, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday with our special edition episodes of Darkness Radio. And tune in, check us out. You can find us on every platform basically out there, everything from iTunes to Stitcher to Spotify. Just look for Darkness Radio and you can keep up to date with the best in paranormal talk radio, now in our 15th year. So make sure you keep tuning in and checking that out. We have links for that. And again, if you are interested in that autograph set that I showed before the break, again, you can get the autographed copy of my book. You can get the Holzer Files autographed card and the card decal, $20 plus $4 shipping and handling. Just email me, dave@darknessradio.com. And my wife will send you out an invoice for that. Once it's paid, we will autograph it and get it in the mail to you post haste. One other quick thing. I do want to make a mention. My son's still doing the polar plunge. We're still collecting until April. So if you'd like to help the Special Olympics and watch my son, Cliff Schrader, Minnesota firefighter, dive into the icy cold waters of Minnesota and help raise money, much needed money for the Special Olympics, all the money that is raised goes to help with their training, goes to help these Special Olympians with their travel and with their uniforms and things that they need so that they can get out and succeed. So whether you could do $1, $5, $10, it doesn't matter. Just make a donation. And here's something cool. If your company matches donations, make sure that you alert them to this and share the link that I will email to you. So all you have to do is email me, dave@darknessradio.com, with your subject line, Special Olympics or Polar Plunge. I'll send you a link. You can donate, and that way you can share the link with your coworkers, and we can get the maximum effect, especially if your company is going to back that donation and double it. So please let us know if that's something you can do. Aaron Sager is our guest tonight. You can check out Aaron's website at paranormalpopculture.com. Aaron is also the host of a very successful podcast. Why don't you tell them a little bit about your show and how they can find you?
Well, thanks, Dave. Yeah, I launched a podcast during pandemic, like so many people did, but it's called Nightmerica. It's a true crime and paranormal podcast where we really kind of tell stories that have accurate historical connections and records behind them. So it's a lot of fun, bring on a lot of interesting guests. And then I also have been doing Paranormal Caught on Camera on Discovery Plus and Travel Channel.
Very cool. So you guys can check that out. Make sure of it. By the way, I'll be appearing on an upcoming episode. I think it's in a week or two on Fright Club. My third episode. I'll be on a Fright Club with Jack Osborne and the Ghost Brothers. I was in episodes, I think 2 and 3 that posted. And I should be coming up again in the next week or two. So keep listening, and I'll let you know when you can tune in and check that out. Aaron, can they find Nightmerica, a link through paranormalpopculture.com?
They can find it through paranormalpopculture.com, but also on all of the platforms, wherever you listen to your fine podcasts. I mean, Dave, like, I think I found you still on MySpace and Napster. You've been doing this for so long that you're like all over the place.
Yes,
Friendster
too. Hey, there are cave carvings of Tim and I right in between Godzilla and King Kong fighting. You see the two of us doing a podcast from a cave somewhere.
It's the ultimate Easter egg.
Yes. We are talking tonight about episode 11, season 2, Darkness Radio presents Holzer's Ghosts. Don't send them to heaven. Now, let's talk about the investigation. Cindy was blocked when she entered Mary Rhodes' room. And Cindy has been blocked a few other times, but this was really weird to her. She couldn't get going. She just couldn't get started. She felt like something in that room did not want her meddling. And as soon as she left the room, we caught that compelling piece of evidence that, like, 10 seconds after they left the room, all of a sudden the rocking chair just starts going. Now, people did notice, again, a shuddering ball of light moving, and then all of a sudden the rocking chair starts going. I can't say that the two are combined, but it is fascinating to see that there is some kind of orb-like activity, and then the rocking chair starts going. So that was pretty cool and compelling, and really neat visual. And it is, right, people are like, why is Cindy saying that's so terrifying? It's because it's every horror movie trope that you've ever seen starts with the rocking chair going back and forth, and nothing good comes after that. So that's part of it. Shane, of course, having the experience with the Ovilus and having it call out Will, boy, sold, and then seeing the boy sitting there staring at him just broke Shane. He broke his heart. He was very emotional about that whole moment. It was a beautiful moment played out on TV, and I hope people realize that. So we do have to give some credit because Shane stayed in. We have a hashtag brave Shane moment on this episode again. No more poor Shane. This was definitely a brave Shane moment to go in there, face it. And when he saw the child and was having the experience, he didn't run out. He didn't freak out. It was just a very heartfelt, holy shit moment for poor Shane. And he did a great job of staying in there. The big topic of the mist, people wanting to know more about the mist that Cindy and Ethel had picked up on at this location. The mist is, to our understanding, kind of that veil between worlds where sometimes the spirits go and get lost because they're not you hear about spirits that are kind of confused and they don't realize they're dead yet, and they haven't made the decision to step away from this life. The mist is kind of that area where they're lost souls. So
Mhm.
Cindy was very concerned and believed that because of all the death, remember this whole area, Native American deaths took place. There was war. There was slaves that tried to make their way out of the country. And that was, by the way, again, just to address the people saying, we don't know that it did. We know for a fact that Waterford, Maine was right along the pathway into Canada. There were other houses that were part of the Underground Railroad. So being a house far out, separated from others, was a great site for this as well. And they might hide one or two runaway slaves in those spots until they could get them safely out and on their way to Canada.
Can I just bring up something, Dave?
Please. Yep.
Something that intrigued me, and I don't know if your viewers and listeners kind of think about this, but when you're dealing with a medium, you really begin to trust their talents. So when they put up that antenna and they're saying they're picking up on things, you really you rely on them. Maybe not
Right.
rely, but you trust them.
Right.
So when they do not pick up on anything, or they are actively being blocked, when that signal goes dead, I guess perhaps pun intended, that in of itself becomes notable.
Right.
Like that absence of any information, any input, any data suddenly becomes part of the investigation, suddenly becomes, it's significant. You feel that.
Mhm.
And so when Cindy goes into a location and she is blocked, that in of itself is an important part of sort of the data collection, in my
Right.
opinion.
Oh, agreed. It's like last week's episode when we were at Stonehenge, America's Stonehenge, when it went silent outside in the wilderness in June, and there's not a cricket noise and there's not a bird. And then all of a sudden we hear that. It was unnerving because it was like the only noise and you heard nothing. And they know there are coyotes or wolves
Mhm.
and other animals in that area. There was not a cricket. It was dead silent. And sometimes you're right, that devoid of information, or an area devoid of information, is almost more terrifying than when you're getting overwhelmed.
It's so creepy. It is so creepy because we are always surrounded by sound, even in nature, even in an old house or old location. There's always some sort of sound. So when it goes dead silent, that is what unnerves me.
And if you hear a sound like, and then Dave goes dead silent, you know there's a problem brewing. Let's talk about a piece of an interview that we did that did not make the episode. Mary's son came to talk to us. Actually, he was just there to help his mom with cleaning up and getting ready for our approach. But he had an interesting story to share, and he agreed to do it. And it was a fun story, but it didn't play into what we were there uncovering. And had we caught any of the same activity, we would have, I'm sure, played that interview. But again, as you said, it's a very tight episode. I don't know what we would have taken out to put that interview in, but I wanted to share it with you guys. He would visit, and he and his wife had a newborn, and there was the two rooms back to back, and the baby was in the one room, they were in the other, and as they were settling in, they started hearing a baby cry. And they're like, oh, the baby. So they got up and they went into the room, and their baby's sound asleep. And he's like, well, that's weird. So he gets back out in the hallway. He's like in between rooms, and he starts hearing the baby cry and a voice, and it's coming from the room his baby's in. And he goes back around there, the baby's sound asleep, and there's nothing going on. Goes back out in the hall and gets into the room, and he can hear the crying and talking through the baby monitor again. That unnerved his wife so much she refused to go back to the house, if I remember correctly, that aspect of it. But she's very uncomfortable being there, especially with the child. So that was a cool element, because when Ethel had been there, she heard a baby crying. She was picking up on some of these different elements that here we are 53 years later, and people that are there now are picking up on this. The house does seem to possess people, like an ownership, not necessarily a possession, but like the house takes ownership of the people and the souls that are there. And maybe because there's this bloody history, there is this psychic scar that has been there, that the area absorbs that and looks for the attention. And that may be why this house is still so powerful. What are your thoughts on something like that?
I mean, it kind of makes sense because I think both the living and the dead are susceptible to this kind of thing. I think that we can all be sort of trapped within this kind of I'm reluctant to use the word vortex because I think that is tossed around a lot. I mean that in a generic sense, sort of like a gravity well, if you will. I think that we are sucked into this emotional gravity well, both those of us that are still living and those of us that are dead. And if something is powerful enough, it does kind of lock us in. And I even think that I don't want to get so esoteric, but I even think that some supposed haunted locations become something of an addiction for some people, where they feel that they can't leave it, that they feel that they have to stay there, and they cannot let it go. I don't know if I'm going too much off on a tangent, but
no, you're
that's
right.
what it sounds like to me.
Right. And people take this ownership. They feel akin to these properties, and there's an importance to them. And they're drawn there for a reason. Maybe it's to preserve that history. Maybe it's to be that voice. And they don't, like the family a few weeks ago, when we visited Westover Manor, none of the family has experiences, but other people that come to visit. Well, maybe that's because the spirits don't want to unnerve the family, but they're there and allowing history to still be told. And this family does such a great version of maintaining that history. So that's why they're not bothered. But then the people that come in there poking around or just there to visit and have an experience, sometimes we become nose blind to smells. We become, sometimes even colorblind to certain situations because we're just so used to it. So they may be having experiences that they just discount without even giving a second thought to. And that very well could be. And with Mary, though, she seems tied to the house. And at the end, I kind of, when she throws that question, is that your concern for me? You see me just kind of freeze. And then I slowly turn to Cindy. And that's because I don't know that it's necessarily my job to tell her, yeah, I'm kind of afraid your soul's going to be trapped in perpetuity in this home. I wanted Cindy to see if she could weigh in, but that's why Cindy was very politically correct, I guess, in saying, well, something to think about.
No, and it's when you live next to, I don't know, a dump for long enough, the smells of that landfill, you stop noticing. It's called olfactory fatigue. And we just kind of get so used to certain things that we start to process it, and this is suddenly normal. Maybe we don't have to worry about this anymore. I'm not saying that's the exact same situation, but I do think that there's a parallel to be drawn.
Right. No, I agree. That's great information. Now, before we go too much further, folks, let's take another look. Next week's episode, Dead Calm. The Holzer Files visits the Queen Mary. We are the first paranormal team in existence that was ever given full access to the ship with no employees and no other people on board. That was the first time in history. Now, I know that there was a company that did it a few months back, but they shot it and did their deal after us, and it was a live stream event, but they had a lot more people than we had on set. So there was very few people, but we had the full access and full support of the staff, and I was very excited to be a part of that. Let's take another peek, and you'll recognize this location, Aaron, and I got to tell you, it was a little heartbreaking because some of the areas that we love to visit are no longer accessible, including the first class pool where the little ghost of Jackie is seen. Let's take a quick look at another scene from next week's episode.
This place is so overwhelming. Because I'm hearing the woman in white is not who they say she is. She's somebody entirely different. God, that's so weird. Who the is that?
Wow.
That was a woman. That was so loud.
Oh my God.
I definitely feel something darker has entered the ship. It feels like an aggressive force, aggressive in nature, something more sinister. I feel it.
And you'll have to tune in Saturday to Discovery Plus for that brand new episode, Dead Calm, of the Holzer Files. Make sure not only do you watch it, but you tell people about it. Get it out there. We only have 2 episodes left. And if you want a season 3, we got to get all those episodes being watched and rewatched as much as possible. And I've got a lot of cool backstories to the Queen Mary. I'll tell you about other examples and moments that we've had on board the ship, but talk about some of the chilling aspects. And I haven't seen the episode yet. So I have to wait till Saturday, like the rest of you. I'll watch it. I'll rewatch it next Thursday, and we'll do another live Holzer Files or Holzer's Ghosts episode about that. So it'll be cool to visit and chat about that. Now let's take a look at the investigation again. Shane has his experience. Cindy has her experience of being blocked, although she's still getting information and data. It's not forthcoming. I went up into the attic area where Jill, her friend, Mary's friend, had witnessed that woman standing in front of the window, and she could sense her there. She could feel it was very unnerving to her while we were there doing our interview. So I decided I wanted to go to the attic. And what you don't see in this scene, to me, was pretty compelling. But again, I get it for tonality and pacing. When I first went up there, it felt aggressive. It felt weird to me up in the attic, and I couldn't explain why. And the camera guy, Rob Toth, who I think will be joining us in 2 weeks for the season finale, he was getting unnerved. And I said, I'm going to do a clearing prayer. And he said, okay. And as I started doing a clearing prayer, all of a sudden on the other side of the attic, where Cindy had told me this is where the main energy is, but yet the vision was being seen over here. This is where as I'm in the midst of doing this prayer, all of a sudden, you could hear something moving. So I'm like, we need to go over there. He goes, okay. So we walk over into that area. And remember, I had just been in the midst of doing a clearing prayer. And then I catch the recording, don't send them to heaven. And I didn't realize this until I was getting ready for this episode. There's more to that EVP. There's 2 other words just before. And if you watch the episode, you're going to hear it now. Because I heard it when I listened to the episode. I'm like, what is that? And I went back and I reviewed the audio. Sure as hell, it's there. Take a look. This is the full EVP that I got. You hear this voice, gravelly voice, say, get out. Then there's a pause. Don't send them to heaven. I'll do it one more time. That's chilling. And hearing the get out, don't send them to heaven. All I heard when we first played it back was that don't send them to heaven. It was so powerful to me. That was the only part I showed them and played for them in the room. And Shane and I talked about it. It wasn't literally until I watched the episode that I heard something at the beginning of that. And I went back and fished out my recorder. And that's what we have on it. I'll play it one more time for everybody. And that to me was chilling. When we uncover that it says, don't send them to heaven, right after I was trying to do a clearing prayer, that was really unnerving to me. And people always ask, do you try to help clear these spirits? After that, I ended up completing a clearing prayer. Now, again, why don't they show it? Why don't they show it? Because it offends a lot of people when theology and religion is brought up. I talk about this almost every episode, but just for people that still are questioning, do we ever do anything to help the spirits? Every location we go to, we do a prayer and healing to try to seal the house and send spirits that are lost out. I don't know if it works, but we do it. We try to do it, or we have experts come in, like at the Morris Jumel Mansion when we had the Santeria priests come and try to clear the spirits and the energy of that property. We do what we can, but we don't always show it because people are open to the paranormal. They're open to the concept of demons, but when you start filtering in God or religion, they don't want to hear about it. And it can offend a lot of people. So in order to offend as few people as possible, we don't show all those aspects.
I would also say that I don't think that any spirit that's in a location, I don't think you're going to force them out if they're not ready to go. I think the clearing can be an assistance. I don't think that it's an eviction notice. And and what you played, I am curious. To me, it sounds like the same voice. Are you hearing the same voice, or are you hearing two separate voices? Get out, don't send them to heaven.
I think it's the same voice, but I'm not sure. Let me play it again, and then you tell me
Yeah.
what you think.
It sounds like the same voice to me.
Right.
And my thought process goes to, okay, well, why are you so protective of what's here, so territorial of what's here, that you don't want them to go, to move on? You want to keep them here. And that, to me, that's super intriguing.
Well, it's terrifying, right?
It's terrifying.
Is something keeping the souls of Mrs. Bell and Mary Road and people that have been there? Is something hoarding? And we've heard of these overlord spirits or elementals, demonics. Could that be it? Could there have been a curse on the land by the Native Americans against the people that were taking it from them? And I don't want to put that on the Native Americans either. There are other people that cursed and did things to one another, the colonialists and the revolutionary fighters. They were always into that. So, and there was a bloodbath not too far from there that took place. So there's a lot of this that could go. But yeah, to hear this thing was not happy with me. Get out. Don't send them to heaven. I'll play it one more time. And the gravelly nature of that voice is what's really so terrifying to me.
You know, like, so, I mean, obviously I can only view things through the perspective of someone that's living, someone that's here. But I also wonder, when we hear something like that, yeah, it strikes me as something that's a little bit more powerful. But also I kind of wonder, if you were looking at this from the perspective of schoolyard bully, ultimately they are weak. I mean, they're powerful, they may be brawny, but they're weak as far as insecure. And I don't know, that's kind of what I'm hearing here. Like, yeah, get out, don't send them to heaven. I'm trying to push you out, but also maybe I kind of need them to stay here. Like, maybe I'm scared myself. I'm insecure myself.
Right.
Don't send them to heaven. I don't know why that's what I'm picking up on, but that's something that I kind of hear in that.
Maybe, and Marianne Winkowski, the real life ghost whisperer that the TV show Ghost Whisperer starring Jennifer Love Hewitt was on, she said that there are some spirits who stay and can't find the light because they've stayed too long. And it's not that the light is not available to them, but they don't know how to find it. So sometimes you have to teach them. So maybe this person's light went out and they don't want to be alone. So they want these spirits to stay so they're not alone on that plane.
It's like paranormal codependence. Like, really?
Right.
Like, yeah.
Cindy Brown says maybe someone evil who's trying to control them. It very well could be. Jim Sues pops on and says maybe it's a punishment to keep those spirits there. Maybe is kind of like hell, a prison for these spirits, which is what it feels like hearing that voice. And what do we have? Veronica says that voice is totally creepy. It really is.
I agree.
I've got two chilling EVPs that I'm going to play next week for the Dead Calm episode that unnerve Cindy, Shane, and I to no end. I don't think they're going to make the final episode or that episode, because although fascinating as it is, sometimes you collect superfluous evidence that has nothing to do with the main story. And again, the integrity of the show is this: if we pull something out just to shove something else in and shoehorn it in, it takes you out of that moment. So sometimes we get into this where this is a story we're telling, we need to follow that narrative, and it doesn't mean we can't go back. And the recordings we have for next week make me want to go back. And Aaron, I'll I don't know, off air, I'll play them for you so you can hear them. But they're two of the most very overwhelming and to me, two of the most terrifying EVP I've ever heard. And that's next week. We'll play that. Let me see here. Nate, if you do have questions, I'm watching. You can go ahead and pop up questions in the chat, and I will try to post them as the show goes. I know we only have a few more minutes left together doing the show with Aaron. Aaron, watching the episode, there were those moments when you heard me talking to the spirits, saying, this is no longer your home. You need to move on. And I was trying to mirror Hans' kind of the stoic nature that he would bring to these investigations, of trying to just help the spirits not get emotionally attached, not get overwhelmed by the moment, but stay in control. And that episode never really frightened me at all being there, even though I could sense there was something there and something that didn't like us. And I heard that EVP. I never got the overwhelming fear I was in danger. So but I do try to maintain when I can Hans Holzer's etiquette of dealing with these spirits and showing some empathy. And I do that in every episode where I'll kind of challenge the spirits, but I do it in a way that's like, you don't belong here, man. Go. You deserve better than being in this dusty, musty old house. Go live a life, live the afterlife. Let's see what we got here. Brian asks, will the episodes on Discovery Plus ever have a full hour of content? Brian, we don't know. This is the first jump that they made. And yeah, these episodes were filmed for TV, so they're 42-minute slots. We're hoping if we get a season 3, we'll be able to build in a little bit more content. Maybe we can give a 52-minute episode or a 58-minute episode. I'm not sure how that's going to work in the future.
It's a whole new world, right?
Yeah.
We're figuring it out as the viewers are discovering it.
Yeah, it's an interesting new aspect. I know there are still a lot of people irritated by it, but you know what? Everybody that's contacted me that said, I only did it because I like Holzer Files, but I'm so glad I signed on now because I love all the programming. That makes my heart happy that they went in and they saw these things and saw all the programming. And there's over 55,000 hours of programming, and a lot of it's paranormal and true crime. So you've got a lot of great content to go back and revisit, and exclusives and shock docs and so much cool stuff that's coming out. It's worth the $5 a month. And I'm going to give you one more.
They can go back and find younger versions of us in those old episodes. I don't know if you've done this. Maybe you're not a narcissist like me, but I've gone back and be like, oh, wow, that's when I was at least like 10 pounds lighter, more hair on my head.
I've never had that problem on any of the episodes, but yeah, it's great I did 7 episodes of Ghost Adventures, so you can see me pop up on the Rolling Hills episode, and the Stardust Ranch episode, and the Return to Bobby Mackey's episode, and there's just a bunch of the Demon House in Seattle. So there's all these great episodes, but it is kind of cool to go back and see my goatee a little browner than it is today. So yeah, it's cool to go back and revisit. And I asked them, are they going to put Paranormal Challenge on there? I'm hoping they do, because you were on Paranormal Challenge. You did 2 episodes, right?
Yeah, and I would like to see it up there, but I'm not eager to see my horrible wardrobe choices. I mean, this was like 10 years ago, man. Like, I don't need to see me wearing that stuff now. Like,
you
but
remember,
I hope it goes up there.
How bloody cold it was at Eastern State Penitentiary. They had, folks, I kid you not, when we filmed that episode, it was Alexandra Holzer, Aaron Sagers, and myself. They actually opened the cell to Al Capone's cell. We got to go in and get a photograph. I should have posted that, but we got to do that and sit in the cell and do a photograph. Then we came out, but it was so cold. They had this giant, it looked like a jet engine, and it was a blower heater that they would turn on for us when we weren't on. And you literally had to be this close to it to feel the heat, because it was so cold. The heat would just and then vanish. It was so brutally cold.
And
Alex
I will
was
say, for anyone out there, like, you can put as many of those little heating packets in your gloves, in your pockets, wherever. It does nothing. When it is that cold out there, it does nothing. You're still freezing.
That's right. Ben asks, is Tim's show still on the air? Trying to find it. Yes, it's Paranormal Night Shift, and it is on Discovery Plus. And I think he's on 7 or 8 episodes out of the 12 episodes. So go watch Paranormal Night Shift. Tim Dennis from Darkness Radio can be found there as well. Oh, that's very nice. Catherine says, I love how respectful and kind you are with all the spirits. Thank you for your humanity. Thank you, Catherine. I do my best because, again, I try to think of these situations in 50 years. How do I want people to treat my spirit if I'm still kicking around, or my children's spirits, or my mother's spirit? Or I want to show that same respect. Doesn't mean I don't get frustrated once in a while, but with spirits that I feel are being nasty or cruel, but you do what you got to do. People are asking, what is Paranormal Challenge? It was a mini series that we did 11, 12 years ago with Zach Bagans from Ghost Adventures, where we would take two opposing paranormal teams, go into a haunted location like Eastern State Penitentiary, Mansfield Reformatory, places like Waverly Hills, and we would pit them against each other. They'd be in different parts of the building. They would be graded on how they knew their technology, how well they knew the history, and what kind of evidence that they would provide for us. The award was a swift handshake from both Zach and I, and that's about it. But it was a fun show. It lasted, I think, 12 or 13 episodes. And I'm hoping they bring it back to Travel Channel, because I'd love to do some talking about those episodes. But those were a lot of fun too.
They were a lot of fun. It was, I mean, I would say that it was kind of ahead of its time. Like, really,
Yeah.
like it's something that really makes sense today.
We've got Anne saying, "Hey, Aaron, what's in the glass you're drinking?"
Okay, well, this is a little bit of limoncello LaCroix and a splash of vodka and a little bit of a tiki umbrella.
I like the tiki umbrella. Kind of goes with the bamboo shade behind you. Well played.
Mhm.
Tanya asks a very important question. You talked about bringing your history with you. I have military PTSD. Is investigating a good idea? I've just gotten started.
It's a great question.
Yeah, I would say this, and I give this advice to everybody. If you've had a bad day, if you've had a fight with your spouse or your friends, or you're just in a crap mood, you didn't sleep well, I wouldn't put myself in those positions, because the more malevolent spirits look for that kind of chink in the armor. They look for those weak spots to mess with you, and sometimes they can influence you. And triggering PTSD might be a fun way for them to screw with you. I would be extremely cautious, Tanya, with doing that. First of all, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service in the military. Both Aaron and I appreciate that. But I would be very cautious, please. Tanya, I'm also going to recommend something to you. I'm not a doctor, but I did like to play one when I was a teenager. Look into EMDR. EMDR. It is a very powerful tool in helping people dealing with PTSD to overcome it. And they work a lot, I know, through VA hospitals with this for veterans dealing with it. And I've talked to a bunch that have gone in, and they said it has been a life changer. EMDR, eye movement desensitization, something. I can't remember what it all stands for. EMDR. I've never had anybody come back to me after I recommend it that didn't say, thank you, that changed my life. So please look into that. And again, thank you very much for tuning in. And I hope I didn't burst your bubble by saying I wouldn't investigate, but you got to be careful.
Can I weigh in on that, Dave?
Of course.
I would just say, first off, 100% agree with Dave. The only thing I would add to that is I think a lot of us carry around different kinds of trauma and things psychologically, mentally, emotionally. And if you are going through therapy for your PTSD, if you have reached a point where you feel like you understand it, you can control it to some level, then I also think that trauma can be an incredibly relatable thing on a paranormal investigation, because I do think that we encounter potential spirits that have likewise gone through trauma, have gone through tragedy. So if you can use that as a relatable thing, that can be effective, but just be careful with it.
Yeah, Elizabeth Fry says EDMR is great. It's EMDR. And thank you, Catherine. She says eye movement desensitization and reprocessing.
Okay.
EMDR. Please, anybody that needs that, look into it. And you're right, using something that affected you can be helpful. When I filmed the episode earlier this season at Franklin Castle, You saw my emotion. You saw how raw I was in dealing with this little girl's spirit that passed away from complications due to diabetes, and the fact that I'd almost lost my daughter 1 year before that to diabetes. It was very emotional, but I think that that emotion is what played part in the very powerful connection we made with that spirit. So, yeah, you make a great point. Catherine also says, I'd like Aaron's drink recipe, please.
I'll put that out there on Twitter, or, you know, I mean, I'm always putting out tiki recipes. Catherine, you know this. You know what I do. You follow Paranormal Caught on Camera, but I will put this out there for you.
Let me see real quick. We had a question that passed by. I want to see if I can get it. Darren says, Dave, I'd ask if Tim was with you, and if not, you'd be sent to go get him. Cannot have half a haunting. If I'm going to get Dave's spirit, I want Tim's too. I don't know that Tim wants to hang around here. Once he passes on, I think his plan is just to move on and, enjoy the afterlife. That's at least the concept he always lets me know. I do have a couple of things I want to mention again here real quickly. Again, darknessradio.com. You can listen to us every Wednesday, Thursday, and now Fridays with these special edition episodes. You can find us on just about every platform that you listen to podcasts. Also, you can listen to Aaron's podcast, Nightmerica. Make sure you go listen for that. It's a fantastic series. Season 2 of the Holzer Files continues March 13th. The episode Dead Calm, The Haunting of the Queen Mary, only on Discovery Plus. So I hope you'll check that out. Please be safe, be kind, love one another. And, we'll be back with you next week. Make sure that you share this show as much as possible with people. Let them know about the Holzer Files. And we may get a season 3 yet.
Exclusively on Discovery Plus.
A lot of shadow figures are seen here.
This may be the only chance we've got to reopen this file.
This goes back to Hans's first investigation 50 years ago. Now there's a new wave of hauntings here.
There are so many spirits in this place.
Definitely hearing something.
He's yelling at me, find my body, find my body.
Look at that. Look.
The Holzer Files, new season, exclusively on Discovery Plus, the streaming home of Paranormal.
That's right. You can find it now on Discovery Plus. Aaron, thank you for joining me and spending a little time, brother. It's always good catching up with you.
Thank you, my friend. Great seeing you, and continued success and well wishes on Holzer Files and Darkness Radio.
Thank you. And make sure you watch Paranormal Caught on Film, Caught on Tape, Caught on a Butterfly Net.
We're caught on camera. We're caught on everything, right. But camera.
All right. So make sure you check that out. Aaron Sagers is a part of that show. Tim Dennis can be found on Paranormal Night Shift, and I can be found usually underneath the bridge on 32nd and 4th over here, panhandling for money. We'll hunt ghosts for food. Thank you all. We'll talk to you again next week here on the best in paranormal talk radio. I'm Dave Schrader. That's Tim Dennis. This is Darkness Radio.